Welcome to the OnBase Microsoft Sharepoint integration product demonstration. For the purposes of this demo, we're going to be using a fictitious story about a fictitious company called 9 Second Foods. 9 Second Foods is a manufacturer of commercial microwave ovens. We have different roles across this organization, as any organization, individuals who perform different functions across the organization. Additionally, we've got IT resources and staff. These IT resources and staff, of course, are charged with the responsibility to make sure that the different workers across the organization have the best technology and tools to help them perform their primary job tasks. First, we have our project manager working on a new product initiative to create a new line of these commercial microwave ovens and located at 9 Second Foods Product Labs. We then have our CFO and accounts payable clerk, along with our technology and IT staff resources, all located at the corporate headquarters. Our accounts payable clerk, her job, of course, is to process all of the invoices and financial transactions that are part of accounts payable. And our CFO, who wants to monitor all aspects of the financial health of 9 Second Foods. Our IT staff has 2 enterprise content management solutions that they'll be leveraging to best meet the needs of these different types of workers. The project manager, who will primarily be a heavy SharePoint user to manage the Microsoft Office documents and related content to the project that she is managing. We'll see how the accounts payable clerk will leverage OnBase transactional content management capabilities to best perform her job functions, and how our CFO will use a strong blend of both of these enterprise content management solutions to perform their job functions as well. So we begin in the role of our project manager. And as the project manager, the first thing I do when I arrive at work today is I double-click to launch the corporate intranet page. 9 Second Foods is leveraging the capabilities, the portal and collaborative and web content management capabilities of SharePoint for our intranet. But because I'm a project manager working on this new product initiative, I am going to click on that new product initiative site that I have to manage this project. And on this page we see an array of web parts, component of SharePoint, these pluggable components that represent or present on a web page SharePoint capabilities as well as OnBase capabilities. I've got some SharePoint web parts such as project announcements, project contacts, some document libraries such as project invoices and vendor contracts available to me. I even have some OnBase web parts to allow me to access some project-related forms. I'm leveraging SharePoint capabilities to manage the project calendar and timelines associated with this new product initiative. In the upper right, just for my information, I've got my local weather report and another capability of SharePoint, which are SharePoint item lists. Here I have a task list that's going to allow me to manage the tasks associated with this product initiative. As this project manager, the first thing that I'm going to do today, my first task to perform, is that I've received a shipment from one of my vendors for some microwave button membranes. And in the past I would have mailed or couriered or maybe faxed that packing slip back to headquarters so it would be available for the accounts payable clerk, confirming that I've received this. But with the OnBase ad hoc scanning integration, what I'm able to do is work in SharePoint as I normally do. I've got all the information about this task that I performed in terms of placing this order with tap-it buttons for these push-button microwave membranes. And then I've got my standard SharePoint functionality available to me. And right alongside that, with the ad hoc scanning integration for SharePoint from OnBase, I have a new ability to attach an image to this SharePoint list item. As I click on that, that presents me with an OnBase web scanning interface that allows me to scan with Twain scanners as well as choose or browse local disks for already scanned items. You'll notice that my keyword values have already been populated. These have been mapped from that task list item that I was managing in SharePoint. So that's going to save me the time of having to index and automatically index this document for me. I'm going to choose my packing slip from a local drive, or again, I could have scanned it from a Twain scanner. I can perform all of my corrections, such as rotation, etc. But this image looks fine to me, so I'm going to go ahead and just upload this image, where it's going to be uploaded directly into OnBase and is now immediately available to the accounts payable clerk working in OnBase back at headquarters. I'm prompted with a dialog. I'm going to say I'm going to quit scanning and return to my task list. And now, alongside that task list item in SharePoint, I can see that it does have an attachment associated to it. As I navigate back to that task list item, I can see again all of the data about that task, that project task that I performed, and now I also can see that the packing slip is attached to this item. Well, this packing slip again has been stored in OnBase, but is still linked relevantly to this SharePoint task item. So by clicking on this link, that will launch me into an OnBase viewer where I can view this document. Now, this document, having been imported directly into OnBase, could have triggered a workflow, but also is automatically correlated with any other documents that it's configured to be associated with within OnBase. For example, I can double-click on this document and pull back cross-reference documents. And in so doing, I can see that the vendor invoice, as well as some other related items to this packing slip, already exist in OnBase. And I know that this packing slip is immediately and available then to the accounts payable clerk back in accounting, back at the headquarter office. Now, in addition to being able to scan images from those task list item pages, I also, in a way very familiar to SharePoint users, can choose from the task list menu to attach an image right the task list view as well. I'm going to return back to the new product initiative page. Now, in addition to being able to scan attachments, again, off of the item list menu that we just saw, I also can scan them directly into SharePoint document libraries. Again, scanning documents through SharePoint into OnBase, allowing me to get those documents directly into OnBase, but still be able to reference them through my SharePoint interface. As my next task as project manager, I want to reference a vendor contract for a vendor I've worked with in the past. I'm going to order a prototype for the new commercial microwave oven that we are creating here at 9 Second Foods. And so I decide that I want to search for the agreement, the vendor agreement that I've had in the past with the folks who've created that prototype for me. So I type in a search string, and I perform a search leveraging Microsoft Enterprise search capabilities. Now I get a whole bunch of results back. With the OnBase integration for Microsoft Search, some of these results may exist within OnBase, and others may exist within SharePoint or other websites or repositories across our organization. Well, I kind of got a broad list of search results, so I'm going to narrow my search by putting in a little additional criteria and reperforming this search within SharePoint. So here I can clearly see the vendor agreement that I had from a couple years ago with Pro Prototypers, who created the prototype for some of our products, and I can click on that link. Now, as a user, I probably could care less where this document is stored. It is stored in OnBase, and again, with the integration for Microsoft Search, it's been made available for me as part of my enterprise search. So I only had to perform one search using Microsoft SharePoint, and I'm able to reference this past agreement that I had with this particular vendor. I'm going to minimize this window because I may have wanted just to have that old agreement available to me as a point of reference, and I'm going to go back to my new product initiative page. Now that I've got that document or that past agreement as reference, I'm going to create a new vendor contract, and in doing so, I'm going to be leveraging standard capabilities of Microsoft SharePoint, allowing me right off of a SharePoint document library to create a new vendor agreement. I could do that here right off my main view, or I could even drill into my vendor contracts document library. Again, very familiar to a SharePoint user. Right off of my new menu, I can create a new agreement using a Microsoft Word template that automatically launches Word for me and automatically associates this new document with that SharePoint document library. So I make necessary changes to this agreement. I'm going to put in the name of the vendor that this contract will be with. I can go ahead, leveraging Microsoft Office capabilities, Microsoft Word, and create all my terms, edit anything else that I need to within this contract. When I'm finished, I'm prompted, because I generated this from SharePoint, I am prompted to complete some SharePoint metadata fields. So I'm going to complete these metadata fields. And I want to make special note that I'm going to set this contract status to final. And I'm going to save this back to my SharePoint document library. Once saved into my document library, I'm going to go ahead and close this Word document or this Microsoft Word window. And I see my document library in SharePoint refreshed, showing me that new vendor agreement in my document library list. Now, this document type, and I had mentioned that in SharePoint here we are managing also some metadata for all the documents that we're managing, and this metadata is mapped to OnBase document types. And the fact that I've changed this contract status to final here is significant in that it is going to automatically archive using the Archive Services integration for Microsoft SharePoint. It's automatically going to archive into OnBase. Now the reason, I'm going to refresh my screen here so we can see when that happens. The reason that this is important is this vendor agreement, once archived into OnBase, and we see that that's been done because the Microsoft Word icon has been replaced with an OnBase icon. That means that this vendor agreement is immediately available to OnBase users, to the accounts payable folks, to the CFO within OnBase now, and could be cross-referenced and leveraged against all the transactions that we have with this prototypers vendor. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and go back to my product initiative homepage. And the next task I need to perform as the project manager is to create a purchase requisition. So I click on an OnBase web part item for eForms. A single click on my purchase requisition eForm will launch an OnBase eForm for me. I can take advantage of standard OnBase functionality, such as autofill key sets. I knew my vendor number. I worked with them in the past. Now I can complete the rest of the fields. Now I'm typing in the amount of $18,000 that I'll be that 9 Second Foods will be paying for this prototype. And the significance of that is that any purchases over the amount of $15,000 have to be approved by our CFO. It's just our internal accounts payable process. So when I do submit this form, it is going to submit directly into OnBase and leverage OnBase workflow to triggering essentially an OnBase workflow and be routed directly to our CFO for approval. Now, finally, one last thing I just want to point out before ending my role as the project manager right now is that I do have this document library for project invoices. And note that currently there are no items in this document library. I just want to make note of that because later we'll come back and see how our integrations for SharePoint will allow the invoices managed in OnBase to automatically be linked to this document library when we return to the role of the project manager. Now I'm going to switch and move to the role of the CFO. As the CFO, I've got my homepage here, again allowing me a blend of OnBase and SharePoint web parts to perform my primary job functions. Some SharePoint task list functionality, some OnBase web parts, some SharePoint document libraries, etc. And the first thing that I see here as the CFO is that in this SharePoint web part for OnBase workflow, I've actually got something that's been routed to me. It's that purchase order that was just completed by the project manager. Clicking on that document name launches me immediately to the OnBase workflow queue that this document resides in and presents to me this purchase request as it was completed by the project manager. I also can see here in my work folder the documents that are cross-referenced, and this new document here happens to be the new contract that we have that was just created by that project manager as well with Pro Prototypers, this new contract that was created for that vendor. So I could reference the terms as the CFO. I can double check things and just kind of see what's going on here. And then having all that information to make my business decision, I can then go ahead and approve this purchase order, which is going to move that purchase order on to the accounts payable clerk, who can take the next step in that workflow process in terms of processing that purchase requisition. I've completed that task, so I'm going to close my OnBase workflow window. Very important to note that every time within these examples that I am launching into OnBase, it's not until I actually launch to an OnBase viewer, like workflow as we just did, it's not until I actually launch a document from OnBase that I'm consuming OnBase licensing. So having this OnBase information available to me is not consuming any end-user licensing. Now on the right here, I've got another OnBase web part, which is an accounts receivable dashboard. Because as the CFO, I of course am very concerned about accounts receivable aging. I've got some warnings and alerts on this dashboard that allow me to see some things I may be concerned about, such as a yellow warning here about an invoice amount that exists in a queue for documents that are 31 to 60 days past due, and an absolutely visible alert in red here for accounts receivable past due invoices 61 to 90 days. But this is not just a nice picture of what's happening, but this dashboard will also allow me, again, to interact with OnBase workflow. Again, at this point, in viewing this information, in being aware of this content and its status in OnBase, I'm not consuming any OnBase licensing. But I can choose to drill down by clicking on one of the bars in this chart, and that will drill me into that specific workflow queue. And not until I actually launch this OnBase viewer am I consuming an OnBase license. So here, as the CFO, I am able to see the invoices that are making up that amount that I'm concerned about, that is 31 to 60 days past due. I can view all of the documents that are there. I can see notes and annotations on these documents as placed by the accounts payable clerk. Again, I could double click and cross-reference, or in my work folder here I can see the documents that are related to this invoice. And additionally, with another OnBase web part, I'm presented a list of aging reports. Now these are reports from my enterprise financial application. Could be an old legacy mainframe, could be a PeopleSoft or SAP system, but these reports were cold processed into OnBase. And leveraging OnBase functionality available to me through this web part, I'm going to launch one of these cold reports, and in doing so, Just kind of fix my zoom there. In doing so, I can see this enterprise financial report. On this report, again, I can see some aging, I can see what's going on. But rather than this just being a text document stored somewhere on a hard drive or stored in a Sharepoint document library, this is actually a cold report managed in OnBase, allowing me to, again, take advantage of native OnBase capabilities such as cross-referencing. I double-clicked there on a item within that report, and it automatically cross-referenced me to the actual invoice for that item list in my financial report. Now, here I've got the invoice available to me. As a CFO, I can gather all the information I need to if I'm going to call my counterpart over at Maximum Burger to get these invoices paid. And again, that was just a simple double click on the invoice numbers listed in this cold report. So now I've completed my tasks as the Chief Financial Officer or CFO as 9 Second Foods. I'm now going to go into another role we talked about in the introduction, as the Accounts Payable Clerk. And as the Accounts Payable Clerk, I arrive at work and I'm going to launch with my desktop shortcut into the OnBase client. Now, as the Accounts Payable Clerk, I've launched into the standard OnBase client where I spend the majority of my day, and I'm immediately launched into workflow because I interact a lot with OnBase workflow. First thing I can see within my workflow interface is that there is a PO approved, a purchase requisition that was placed in here that I need to do something with. Well, I can click on this purchase order, and displayed in my viewer area is that same e-form that we saw earlier, completed by the project manager, approved by our CFO, and now is in queue for me in OnBase for processing. In addition to being able to see that, I also can see the related documents. I can reference the new agreement that our project manager made or created for that vendor. To understand what to do and how to process this purchase requisition, I again can move back to that requisition, and I can go ahead and execute my OnBase workflow task to have the purchase order generated for this purchase requisition. And that purchase requisition has moved on to the next queue for processing. Now, in addition to working with workflow and managing a volume of documents through workflow, I also, as the Accounts Payable Clerk, am responsible, and I just click the Scan Index button up on top here, and I am responsible for the production imaging of all of the invoices and accounting or accounts payable related documents that come in as paper that need to be scanned and indexed into OnBase. I've already spent some time and I scanned a batch in that was scanned and indexed previously, and I see that batch sitting in a status of await commit. So that I could just approve for it to be released into OnBase because all of the indexing is complete. Now I'm going to double click on this batch just so we can see here that it is actually comprised of 16 different documents from 4 different vendors. Some of these documents may be, or invoices may be, related to that new project initiative being managed by our project manager out at the labs. And some of them may not be related to that. But when I do take my next step to release this scan and index content into OnBase, and I commit this batch to make it available to OnBase users, OnBase is automatically, via our content connector integration, it is automatically going to post links to only those invoices related to that new product initiative out to that new product initiative site. So I commit that batch, and as the Accounts Payable Clerk, I finished this portion of this role of the demo. Returning to SharePoint, back in the role of the Project Manager, I return to my new product initiative screen. And as I return, I see that my Project Invoices document library has been updated with a couple of folders. I'm going to drill down to the Project Invoices And here I'm going to drill into the folder for my vendor tap it buttons. And as the project manager, I can see all of the invoices related to my project financial transactions or the charges that I'm incurring against my project budget. I can see these links available to me. Again, I can click on any of these links. That's going to launch an OnBase viewer, allowing me to see that OnBase document, but to see it from my Sharepoint site in a relevant way where these are only the invoices that are related to my project. Now, as the project manager, because this is going to hit my project budget, I actually can interact with OnBase workflow through the OnBase viewer for Microsoft Sharepoint. I can, again, see related documents such as the purchase order and the packing slip associated with this invoice. I can see notes that have been placed here by the accounts payable clerk, leveraging all standard OnBase functionality, and interacting with workflow. Because I have permissions to the project invoice approval queue within workflow, I can actually execute tasks associated to that workflow queue. So I double click on my approve for payment, and that task panel or that workflow panel disappears because this has now been approved. And as I close this window, I still will have a link to this invoice for the duration of my project so that I can reference it, but no longer need to interact with it and continue with my job functions. Now, in the past, I may have had to log into OnBase to interact with that workflow, or I may have had to gain approval in some other manner from the accounts payable clerk to go ahead and process that invoice against my project budget. So with all of these OnBase integrations, I hope you can see how we're leveraging both the strengths of Sharepoint and OnBase to meet the needs of different types of users across an organization. So this has been the OnBase Microsoft Sharepoint integration product demonstrations. Thank you for your time.